So sustainable, in other words, has come to imply sustaining the present circumstances and way of life. Now, of course, we wouldn't mind having a few annoying aspects removed as we go along, but essentially that's what the idea of sustainable has become. However, it's exactly the present situation which cannot be sustained. And we need to come to grips with that fact. So in order to help with that, I'll be showing just a few transparencies, and here are the first few. Oops, go this way. You're all familiar with by the way, don't worry about all the fine print on this picture. What we have here is a plot of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere over the years. And this starts, I have to move this up just a little bit. It starts in the year 1000 and goes to 2000. And here we have the 20th century, which there's a little shading here to indicate the width of the 20th century in that graph. Now, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere used to hover around 280 parts per million. Since then, it has risen, and risen more and more steeply. And at the time when this was drawn, this picture, which was around 1999, it was almost, well, it goes up. 1998, it was around 370. This, by the way, and the other charts that I'm going to show are from Ed Ayer's book called God's Last Chance, which was published in 1999 by the World Watch Institute. And he has this plot, which only goes, as I say, to 1998. Since then, the latest news is that we have gone above 400. Now, the carbon dioxide, we're talking about parts per million, and so that's a tiny quantity, and a lot of people don't think that much about it. But carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. It's not the only greenhouse gas, but it's an important one because we put so much into the air, and you see how this fantastic increase has taken place just over 1 century. So this is a critical situation, and it's critical because once something goes up like that, either there's going to be a crash of some kind, or somehow a limit is reached. Well, there is no limit to how much carbon dioxide you put in the air until you have burned up all the fossil fuel and all the forests and so on the planet. That's the limit. Now, what we have done is we have, the planet Earth has become a livable planet for humans and lots of species as a result of carbon dioxide having been absorbed by plants over millions of years and put into the ground and has become what we call coal. Now, in the time of 1 century, we have put all this thing back into the air. So in order for the natural processes to bring that much carbon back in the ground, it would take, again, maybe 1 million years or so. So in other words, this is not a situation that can just continue the way it has been going. This is a critical thing. But let's go to the next graph. this looks very similar. It's also a curve that goes very steeply up, and it is extinctions of species, plants and animals that have disappeared. And there have always been, as a natural processes, there have been some extinctions. But, and by the way, this is not accumulated extinctions, it's extinctions per year. So the extinctions per year has been relatively low until around 1500. And now if we look at the 20th century, which is this little bar in this scale, which this started with 5,000 BC, goes up to 2,500. Well, we don't have that data. But anyway, the last century, it has shot up, and it's off the chart. So the number of species that are eliminated annually because their living conditions have vanished is mind-boggling. Now you don't hear much about that because there's no money in talking about extinctions, so we don't hear about it. But if we were concerned about human life, we have to be concerned about the life of the biosphere as a total, because we depend on that for living. So the extinctions are similar to the carbon dioxide, or actually even more strongly, totally out of hand as a result of the many impacts of human activity on the planet over this past century. Next. There is a consumption expressed in trillions of dollars gross growth product, or the equivalent of that, so purchasing equivalent. Again, don't worry about the specific text that's in here, but let's look at the graph. We have a very similar situation there. Consumption, which ultimately means consumption of resources on the planet, was very small for a very long period of time. This starts at 0 AD, and we're going to 2000 over here. So it's only in the last century, which is this little strip here, that the consumption has suddenly shot up and is out of sight. Now, the consumption is not just the consumption of resources, but it produces waste. And everything that's consumed or everything that's bought ends up somewhere either in a dump or in the atmosphere as a result of getting burned, or in the ocean as a result of pollution. I mean, we have these large gyres of plastic floating around in the ocean, which is getting ground down into small particles that get eaten up by the small fish, and the small fish get eaten by larger fish, and eventually we eat them. Now, these plastics are poisonous because plastic absorbs some of the liquid poisons that are in the ocean, the pollution that's in the ocean. So it's not just a neutral plastic. These plastic particles are poisonous because of the natural pollutants that adhere to the plastic in the ocean. Next, we go to the last figure that I wanted to show. And that's the standard. There we go. The human population. human population from 5,000 BC to, here's 2000. The 20th century is the narrowest slot there. You know, it's very small and gradually rises, and then in the 1600s things start going up significantly, and in the 20th century, here we have 1900 and so on. We have risen from 1.5 billion. This is in billions. Well, I mean, 1,000 millions. From 1.5 billion to 1999, 6 billion, and of course, you know, now we're 7.1 billion or thereabouts, and it's even above the chart. So just since 1999, there has been a further increase. Now, these are all things which cannot be sustained. There's going to be a tremendous reckoning that's going to come, and we don't know what what this is going to imply. We can only just imagine it. If we want the human population to be sustained on the planet, it would have to be reduced to about 1.5 to 2 billion total. I mean, this in terms of being able to feed people. We're now destroying the resource base with the kinds of factory farming that we're doing, and that can't last very long. In other words, the high chemical input farming that's being done now gradually exhausts the soil, and after 30, 50 years or so, the productivity goes way down, no matter what you do in terms of chemicals.